So we have our 12 by 6-inch rectangles, and we have to sew them together into a tube. So what we're going to do, we're just going to put right sides together like this. And we're going to sew them. We're going to serge them together so we have that one seam right there like so, and they're folded in half lengthwise. And then we'll have a tube. We're just going to serge it like we have been. I'm actually letting the raw edges run right along the edge of my serger bed right here, okay? That way it's just going to trim off a tiny little bit. I'm sewing the 6-inch side, not the 12-inch side, because I have it folded in the 12 inches, it's folded in half where the 12 inches are. So it's folded in half lengthwise. So here's one that's not folded. Okay, it's folded up like this. So that 6-inch cut is what we're sewing together, the two 6-inch cuts. So as you can see, this is what I now have. I have a tube. So here's the 12 inches. All I did was bring these two ends up together, match them up, and sew it along the 6-inch cut. And we're going to do that to both of them before we go any further. So what I'm going to do now, here's the actual seam. So my right sides are on the inside of my tube in here. All I'm going to do now, I'm going to take these two seam lines, I'm going to bring them together so that the wrong sides are together, and I'm going to clip it or pin it, which I'm going to pin it. Bring my pins back over here. I'm just going to, ouch, I'm going to put a pin in right there. And then I'm going to just fold that up all the way around and pin these together, only in 4 places though. So once I finish turning it, after I've got this first area pinned where the seam is, okay, then all I'm going to do, I'm going to smooth it out with my fingers. Okay, that'll kind of get it lined up. And then in every quarter mark away from each other, I'm going to fold it in half. I'm trying to make it so it doesn't sound confusing. I'm going to fold it in half right here. Okay, so there's my first pin. I'm going to put a pin over here because those first 2 pins, we will line up with the sides, the 2 seams in each leg. Okay, so I'm going to put a pin there. So here we are. So what I've done, I've turned it, and you can see I have 2 pins there right now. Okay, there is the fold on that 12 by 6-inch. So when I did that seam and I fold it in half with wrong sides together, I end up with this double thickness tube. See that? Oops, there we go. This raw, the edge with the raw edges is what we will sew to our pants leg opening. And then this is what will actually be the finished edge of our pants, is this double fold right here. Right as it came off of the serger, get it here. Here's my actual seam right here, okay? Okay, so I seamed it like that, right there. Now, all I'm gonna do, I'm not gonna turn it because I'm not gonna turn it first because I'm gonna turn it as I pin it. So I'm gonna match up my 2 seams. And then when I do that, wrong sides are together. And all I have are the right sides facing outside. So I have those pinned. That's that seam line. That's the outside of the seam. The seams are on the inside of this. And as I just go around and then finish turning it, you will have a cuff. You can call it a cuff. That'd probably be the best word to describe this, I guess. You've made a cuff for your ankle for the leg opening. Okay. And as you can see, when you start to do this, that fabric really wants to turn and curl. And that's the whole point of doing this first pinning. And then we're actually going to serge around this without attaching it to anything with a narrower seam. And then we'll attach it to our leg opening, and that makes it easy peasy. What I have done, if I fold it in half at the pins, basically my pins are like at the 4 points of a compass, okay? And that's, I'm gonna use these pins as a guideline once it goes back to the pants itself. So I'm gonna do this on both of them. So this next step is an extra step that I added to make attaching them to the pants maybe a little bit easier. You can also skip this step and go right to the pants and attach them to the legs. I just think you get a much cleaner finish when you do it with this other method. So what we're going to do, we're going to change our settings just for this step. Then we'll return them to the original setting. We're going to take our stitch width and we're going to make it the smallest it is. And then we're going to turn our stitch length all the way up to 4. Because what we're going to do here, this is basically what we're going to do. We're going to base these raw edges together, and then we're going to attach them to the garment. It'll make the next step so much easier. So all we're going to do here, we're going to actually stitch on the inside of this cuff, okay? And what I mean by that, I'm actually putting the inside of the cuff of the tube facing up, right here like this. Does that make sense? I have found anytime you're attaching, whether it's a set-in sleeve or, for this instance, a cuff, it's always better to sew on the inside of it than to try to squish it out of the way and putting right side up. So if you sew on the inside of a tube, it'll just come out a whole lot cleaner. So I have my knife set at its most narrow width and my length at its longest length for this step. And all I'm going to do, I'm just going to go entirely around this circle. And as I do, I will take my pins back out and I'll put them back in a moment. And I'm just letting the edges of the fabric right along the edge of the machine right here. This is what I'm using for a seam guide. And since these are so narrow, this little seam, this little basting seam, they'll be cut off in the next step. But what will happen is we don't have to worry about these. We won't have 3 raw edges that are wanting to roll separately from each other by doing this. This is just a little tip. After I've made about 20 pairs of these pants, and this is something I learned through experimenting that just made this process easier. Okay, so there's one. You can see what that looks like right there. So now all of these raw edges are serged together and there's just a fold line around the cuff right here. Okay, so I'm gonna do that to the second one as well. Turn your pants inside out, so that the right side of the fabric is on the outside and our seams are all to the inside of our pant legs and our waistband. And then we're going to reset the stitch settings on our sergers. We're going to turn the cutting width all the way back up to its widest setting, back up to 7.5. And then we're going to turn our stitch length back down to 3. Okay. And then what we're going to do, one leg at a time. So as you can see, here's my raw edge from the last step right here. Here's the raw edge of my leg opening. And I'm just going to line up these two edges right there like so. And I want to put the seam line in the cuff and match it to the inside seam of the leg opening. Okay. Because that is going to be our start and stop point. So here is my inside seam for the leg opening. There's the thread tail for it. Okay. And I'm just going to line them up, right side, everything, right sides together now. So right there is the seam for my cuff. There's the seam, inside seam for my leg opening. And I'm just going to put one pin right there. And there'll be some thickness there. When you go over that on your serger, just slow it, take it nice and slow, and it'll be fine. And then all I'm going to do is line up the raw edges from the pants to the raw edges of the cuff and put about 4 pins all the way around it, just kind of like we did before. This time it'll be much easier to do because we are pinning to a serged edge, and it's going to line up way easier. Now, imagine if you had to do 3 layers at once for this step. That's why I added this other step to do the serger basting with. It just makes this part, because this is the most important step for our leg opening, is this one. And here, if you have to, when we're serging, you can always stretch it a little bit to line it up. Shouldn't have to stretch it much, but it should perfectly line up all the way around. Let's see if I can get some light on it where it would show better. Let's see here. There we go. You can see inside of here now, if I put my hand in here, it'll go all the way up the pant leg. The cuff is on the outside of the pants right here. Get it away. There we go. And then I'm going to repeat that on the other side. But once you get both of them pinned like this, then we're going to serge them all together. Same method, putting, lining up our raw edges with the edge of our serger, and we've moved our width up to 7.5 and our stitch length down to 3, and then we're just going to serge all of those edges together. Okay, we're going to stitch from the inside of our opening. So we're going to actually put the presser foot on top of the inside of the pant leg. Okay. And here we definitely want to make sure our edges line up and run them against the edge of our serger. Okay. And when I come up to the seam lines, I'm going to slow up. And I'm just going to take it nice and slow, get everything lined up on that edge before I go. Okay. There's another seam line I'm coming up on. Okay. Here's my inside seam, actually. And when you get back to where you started on one, you just want to overlap it a bit without cutting the previous stitching where you started and run it right off the edge. So what that looks like is this right here. Right here is where I ran it off the edge. There you go. You can kind of see how they cross right there. Okay. So that cuff is completely done. And now I'm going to do the second cuff to my yoga pants.